Yeah, do I need to push that or you push it?
I did it.
Okay.
Okay, we are now recording. It should ask everybody to confirm that that's okay. Um, all right, so because we do have people beyond the acceptable quorum, the two board members who are not regular members of this committee will remain on mute, just to avoid Brown Act violations. Okay, so roll call. I'm here. David's here. Miran is not. Welcoming Madison. I tend to be a little informal, so except for the two that can't actually speak, feel free to pipe in when you need to. Okay, Madison? The same with anyone else that we will have show up. And all right, roll call. I'm like 6 minutes ahead. Woohoo! So the first main agenda item is discussion and possible action regarding existing / or upcoming city / county services. So I would really appreciate it if David would be willing to talk about some of his recent experiences with dealing with the county services, and I'll talk about some of my stuff as well. But I think that the services are falling drastically short of what is necessary right now, and that's my opinion. Everybody is entitled to theirs, but I wanted to discuss this.
So sure, is it okay to go ahead?
Yes, please.
So earlier we were speaking about some of the services that I've been reaching out to, 311, 211. I told Brandy that we have a homeless woman in our community at the PRNC Town Center, and I've reached out to 211 twice and filed an E6 report, which basically is they send out the PET team, and that's a psychological evaluation team to come out to see how she's doing. But as of yet, we haven't heard a word from them, nor have they been out to the community. So I was speaking to a few of the businesses because now that this woman is getting aggressive, unfortunately, she's getting aggressive with some of the young ladies that work at Bath and Body, as well as some of the employees at Starbucks. And so now she's escalated, and unfortunately, it's going to most likely get turned over to LAPD. But on the point of, city services or county services, they're very slow to respond. And that's a huge problem because those are our tax dollars at work, and it's not right. When we reach out for services, it should be handled appropriately and in a timely manner. That's all I have to say on that one. I don't know where we're going to go with this because fortunately I don't see, until they respond, I have no idea. I think, our best bet honestly is going to be to reach out to, Ken Kraft at Hope of the Valley, and maybe he can just come by and see if she can, get help from their group. I don't know what to do right now.
Yeah, and I'll reach out to some of my direct contacts. The there is a medical triage system, and that's one of the numbers I have. Unfortunately, the problem with the medical triage is I've been told repeatedly that it takes a significant amount of time to wait for them to come out. This is part of the problem with all of them. With 311, I know David tried to get through the first time, and it was a half-hour wait for him. I was able to get through a little bit faster than that. If 211 is non-responsive, 311 takes forever. And I've gotten through to 311, and depending on the person I'm speaking with, the time of day, there's just a lot of issues with how our city and county is handling these services. And frankly, I just think there's a lot of improvements that really could be made. And I think this is an issue that we can leverage the neighborhood council as a voice to improve these services. Because I feel right now they're kind of bare minimum. When I got through to 311 this time, I got 2 different phone numbers depending on whether I felt this person needed more of this kind of help or this other kind of help, whether they have, and I've been given, oh, well, if you think that they're in mental health crisis need, you can call the mental health triage or this other mental health organization. If you think that there's a medical issue, you can call 911 or call this other service. If you think they're a veteran, you can call this. If you think they have kids, you can call this. And there's just such an array I mean, if 911 worked the same way, you'd be calling because, hey, somebody broke into my house, and they'd be like, okay, well, if you think your intruder is on drugs, call this number. If you think your intruder is trying to steal gems from you, call this other number. Like, no, you call them, they take responsibility, and they handle it on the ground. And that's kind of more the system that we really need, that people need to be able to, as a normal citizen, report that they see this, or report themselves if they're like, hey, I'm homeless, I need this help, and get help. It shouldn't be like a big surprise, but that's what we want to, I think, ultimately go toward. So we definitely need more, and it's hard because city and county are under financial crunch, and I get that. But even before that, we didn't have this.
It's even going to get worse, even with as many LAPD meetings I've been sitting on.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much going to be the same thing. They're going, unless it's life threatening,
Yeah.
it's going to get calls going to be pushed into a different direction. So I think there's going to be all types of new highways to be traveling if you want to get a response. And I do know that a lot of people that were on the call that I was on last night, were sharing that even when they've made calls, you know, by the time that they were able to speak to somebody, the issue was already gone, dissolved. It was like a mute case by the time they were able to speak to.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what we're going to be doing in the coming months. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of our usual tactics are kind of out the window right now, because normally when there's somebody in desperate need who isn't getting help, there are nonprofits I would call, and they would sometimes go as far as paying for a hotel room for the night for somebody while they wait for help, and we obviously can't do that right now. Hospitals used to be. We had one case where a homeless man I came across. This is about a year ago. It was during one of those really cold nights where it was dangerously cold to be out with no protection, and he just had nothing on him except a basic shirt and thin pants. And he's like, I'm homeless. It's getting too cold. And it was about, I forget, 8 o'clock at night, I think. So I called for services, and what we were told was all of the places, Hope of the Valley, all of these other places in the area require people to be at a particular pickup location by a certain time. Depending on the place, it was like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. You had to be there, and that was it. If you weren't at that pickup spot by that point, you just can't get in for the night. And of course, all the places were full because it was cold. But he was itching a lot, so we said this looked like it could be a health thing, and there was kind of a nod of like, well, you could take him to the hospital or call for an ambulance. And that was what we ended up doing. We got a couple people to help us drive him to the hospital, and the hospital would keep him there while it was too cold for him to go out. But they can't do that right now because of COVID. We have another community member who's joining us. So I will give a moment for their audio to connect. Excellent. And welcome to Daniel. We are just doing the item number 4. We were talking, oh, nope, left. Either his internet gave out or he didn't care. Okay. So yeah, they're just, we can talk about if there's any way we feel that this could go, but I do think it would be worthwhile to bring this up as an agenda item with the larger board to find out if there are other members of the community, whether they've tried to report homeless RV issues or homeless people they've had encounters with at small businesses, or just trying to help somebody on their own. What are their experiences with the services, and really see if we can get some idea of what people wish that they saw. because I might be too deep into it. I've been doing it for a while, but for someone else, I hear stories every once in a while, but I think it would be good to have the larger community talk about their experience. And for some who haven't experienced it, kind of understand what's going on. Because I think a lot of people think it's easy that you just call a number and get into a shelter and get a warm meal, and it's on you if you don't do that.
I have a question, if you don't mind
Please,
me asking, Brady.
please.
So Madison, can you give me, if you don't mind, um, kind of the perspective of how, what do you think the students in high school, how do they feel about this homeless barrage that's affecting you guys? Because I'm sure you've never seen an onslaught of so many people living on the street. So if you don't mind me asking, I'd just like to get your opinion, as a youth, how you guys feel about it.
Mhm. Yeah, so just living in Porter Ranch, I'm not too sure what street it is, but I believe like going down, I think it's off of Reseda and Rinaldi, there's like 3 RVs parked on the side. And you most of the time, like my brother and sister and I, sometimes we walk down that way with my parents, like just taking a walk or whatever. But sometimes like when we see like those homeless RVs, it's kind of like I'm not sure if it's like they're allowed to be there, but like sometimes we would just see like bottles of just like urine on the side. And just from thinking about just looking at from a high schooler's perspective and seeing, I guess since I go to Granada, which is practically about 5 minutes away from my house, yeah, I would definitely say there's definitely been a definite increase in homelessness. But I guess our immediate reaction, I suppose, as high schoolers would be to just veer away from it, just because we've always been taught by our parents and especially by, I guess, teachers as well, to steer clear of those areas just in case, because we're not too sure about what type of situation those homeless people might be in. Not saying that like all homeless people are bad, which is definitely not the case, but it's always just better to
Right.
be safe. So I think that even though we're not going to school right now and we definitely haven't, I guess, physically had to experience like maybe perhaps walking to school and encountering a homeless person on the way, in my opinion, it's definitely might have been feeling a lot more unsafe, because just personally speaking, when I'm like walking past those RVs that are filled with homeless people, I don't know, just personally feeling I feel a bit unsafe just walking by, but that could just be me, of course. But
No, it, you have
Not
every right
uncommon.
to feel that way. And I mean, and it's, I there's the other high school that's off of Balboa in Devonshire, and now all down Devonshire, there's I could this today I counted close to probably, I don't know, 50 to 60 tents,
yeah.
running down Devonshire. So I feel for the high school students that have to, go to school off of Balboa and Devonshire. There, fortunately, we don't have a lot of homeless encampments right here in Northridge or Porter Ranch, but they are growing. So, my concern is literally, like for my daughter, I can tell you that she goes to a ballet school in Chatsworth. And at one time we had, I don't know, maybe 8 RVs outside, and I had to call the police because I felt it was unsafe for the young girls that were going to ballet to be surrounded by the people living right outside their front door. So thank you for your input. I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, homelessness, I think, just especially right now, these circumstances have become such a major issue just because so many people have just been turned away by the situations that we're in.
Yeah.
And definitely, I would rather find a solution or at least try to make a difference, at least because I want at least like high schoolers such as myself and even like my younger siblings to at least feel safe when walking down the street instead of like feeling threatened by, or not threatened, but terrified or scared of seeing homeless
You might not be
It's the
aware of
unknown.
this, but believe it or not, there are a lot of students that are in high school, that are in
Yes.
junior high, that are affected by homelessness because of their families and stuff. So I just wanted to see your input. There's people probably you that go to school with you that you had no idea that
Hmm.
they are homeless. And yeah, it affects me a lot because I deal with it, and I really try to make a difference in people's lives, both, if they're with their parents or not. my main goal is to try and get them off the street and get them somewhere where, where the students can go to school, or the parents can, get assistance and get back, try and get a job. It's tough. I don't think I think we all want a solution. We all would like a resolution to this, but I don't see it, coming down the pipe anytime soon.
Yeah, and in terms of numbers, the last homelessness count happened just before the pandemic, and at that point, LAUSD, they have a division that works on homelessness, and they had identified more than 17,000 students in LAUSD that were considered homeless, and those are just the ones they were aware of. But
So imagine that, Madison, at
yeah,
Granada, you have 4,600 students. That's basically four, almost
one of
four
every
times that.
three. Yeah, it's and across the state, it's about 270,000 students. So it's a lot. And this was before the pandemic, where something that we are keeping an eye on. This starts to move into the next agenda item, but that's okay. There has been studies done about homelessness, that one of them prior to the pandemic said that there were 750,000 people in Los Angeles City that were one paycheck or one problematic moment away from being homeless, and then a pandemic hit. So this is a problematic moment for many people, and we have no idea how many of that 750,000 people may end up being homeless due to COVID. But one estimate for the nation said it between 30 and 40 million people could be evicted and become homeless, which is several states worth of people suddenly becoming homeless. So we have absolutely no concept of how many people this is going to hit, and relatively soon.
On- So
Go ahead.
what motion would you consider bringing to the board, or discussion and possible action?
Yeah, I think it needs to. I think it needs to start as a discussion. Um, I would like, for those who have joined us since we had started, we're working on we started on the discussion of item 4 of city and county services. I would like to bring a motion to, or an agenda item to the board to start with, that is a discussion, possible action on basically what I said here, city and county services involving homelessness, and or effectiveness of city county services. So we can just have that open discussion and see what the public says, what other board members have to say. I would love to hear the ones that can't speak today, and see if there is a collection of recommendations or preferences in how the city and county handles it, and then use that to draft a letter.
Well, hopefully, we'll get that on I'll put that on the agenda.
Excellent.
But what I would like to do is, I will reach out. Well, I reach out all the time anyway, but we'll definitely reach out to Jared DeGonia as well as Colin Crew, and let them
Yeah.
know that this will be on our agenda, and we would like them to speak on the behalf of the city and the county. What's your thought on that?
I like that. I was actually going to recommend. You went to the staffers. I was immediately thinking going to the politicians. The more people we can get involved, the better. The more immediate impact, the better. So yeah, definitely reach out to them. I'm thinking I'll reach out to the alliances, both of the two done homelessness alliances, both the West Valley one and the larger one, and see if anybody else wants to show up and talk about this, because anything that we come up with in ours that informs a letter might be something that other neighborhood councils will want to take up at their meetings.
I like it.
Do we want to vote on going forward with this, or do you just want to do it because you're president?
We can still, it's part of your meeting, so we might as well vote on it anyway.
Okay. How do I want to put this motion? Those who would like to see the aforementioned agenda item put on the larger board meeting, who can vote, please, please feel free to say aye.
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 Okay, motion passes.
Well, we have two public members who can also vote, Madison and
That's true too. You're right.
Aye.
okay.
We have ER.
Would you like to speak on this at all, ER?
I'm just
Okay.
maybe observing.
That's fine.
Okay.
Nobody has to speak. Nobody's required to. All right. So moving on. Agenda item 5, discussion and possible action regarding the impact of COVID-19. Okay, so we started this a little bit. So one of the things about homelessness, a lot of people think they're very discrete issues, but they're all run into from one to another. So it's very hard to speak discreetly about anything involving homelessness because there's so many things that are all run into each other. So as I had already mentioned, yeah, it's likely to get a lot worse, and we just don't know how much worse. We don't know. We did have the CPAB committee meeting with we have another member on homelessness with Ken Kraft, and he talked about some of the issues with what's going on with Project Homekey, Project Turnkey. Both those are two different. One leads to the other. Project Turnkey is when we put people who are experiencing homelessness into hotel rooms, and Project Homekey is when we try to change some of those hotel rooms into viable housing or get those people who are in the hotel rooms into viable longer term housing. So those are two different projects, but they are related because generally it's people in Project Turnkey that get into Project Homekey. And there's been some struggles and there's been some successes. I know that Ken Kraft had said they built a lot of temporary small shelters and they filled up just immediately. There has been a lot of problems that people who are entered into Project Turnkey, especially, there's a lot of difficulty because people are still getting sick, and sometimes people who go into those places become afraid that they're going to get sick from other people, and so some of them won't stay the full quarantine time, or they'll leave. And sometimes we also have a hard time discerning whether somebody has left because they've just left, or if they have just gone somewhere for the day, like to get food or take a meeting with somebody they need services, exactly, or a potential job interview or any of those things. So there's a little bit of difficulty in trying to navigate what part is them trying to live their lives and improve their situation, and what part is people just running because they're scared or because they can't be kept in place for 2 straight weeks of quarantine because they have other demands on their lives. As an example of something that doesn't come up a lot, but isn't discussed a lot, I should say. Oftentimes, if you are an adult with a minor who has just reached around the age of 17 or 18, they're not allowed to be with you because they're no longer considered a minor. So you're no longer a family as far as the homelessness services are concerned. So they can't stay with you. And so we do see issues of parents with newly adult children, and they'll leave to go see their kids to make sure their kids are okay frequently. And there's also kind of that separation. There's also, this is an ongoing problem. This isn't a new one. We have issues with how we segregate populations. Oftentimes out of safety, sometimes out of convenience, we'll say, this space is only for families with minors. This other space is only for single males. This other space is only for single females. This space is only for people with certain medical conditions. So we'll split people up, but then that causes people to be split up from their families because there's a lack of spaces for example, adult married couples. But so you're far more likely to get into a housing space if you are single than if you are married. So sometimes they just agree to, okay, I won't see you for a few months because there's nowhere else there's no way I can do this. Or they'll try to leave and go meet up when they can. And many of them don't have good transportation, so that can be an issue. And sometimes, yeah, they can't get in somewhere because there's an opening in a place, but they don't qualify. They're not a veteran, they're not a domestic violence victim, they're married, they have a dog, they have kids, they don't have kids, whatever their particular situation is, doesn't match the exact criteria of this space. So even when we have space, it isn't necessarily open to everybody. And go ahead, David.
Just a good footnote, with the benefit of the tiny houses, the tiny house, or they call it tiny communities now. The beauty of that is that the people that are married, or brother and sister, or family members, whatever it may be, they can stay in that tiny little house or with a child together. So that's one of the benefits of the new tiny houses. So
yes, generally,
excited about that.
I will say generally that's true. You can have a community of tiny houses that are treated the same way as a shelter, which can have those restrictions, like this is only for families, or this isn't allowed. Nobody is allowed here if they have a felony conviction, which is also another issue because so in Los Angeles, we have a system where if you have been given any kind of fine or other citation for something related to your homelessness, like trespassing because you fell asleep on a park bench or a bench outside of a business or just slept outside of a business, loitering, the things that oftentimes are related to just the act of being homeless. LA has, or at least had prior to the pandemic, a court that happened about once every 1 or 2 months where you could go and get that expunged. Because areas where they don't have that, it becomes an issue that you could, so you fall asleep on a bench and then you get a ticket for loitering. And maybe it's only a couple $100, but you don't have a couple $100. So eventually you can't pay it, you fail to pay it, and then that can create a new citation or a bench warrant because you're for failure to pay. And then that comes with more fines. So there are a significant number of homeless individuals throughout the state of California, largely in other areas, but some in LA, where they have tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt specifically related to fines that have accumulated. And if you get a bench warrant, then you can be found guilty for not being somewhere as a trial date that you may not have even known about. So you have a felony record without having actually gone or done anything because you slept on a park bench and weren't able to, navigate all of the paperwork involved in that. And then a lot of shelters and spaces won't allow you in if you have a felony conviction or if you have a bench warrant. I've actually had to pay off bench warrants for families where somebody had something like this happen. And it was just paperwork related, but it would still, okay, I'm going to pay $1,200 to clear this silly thing for you. Now you and your children can get into the shelter. And those are dependent on the shelter and the space, which is another issue that they're all very individualized. Some are run by nonprofits, some are run by government, some are run by schools, some are run by, religious institutions. And so they can all have different requirements. And inconsistency is a big issue. And then COVID happened. So all of this has gotten so much more worse and complicated. We have seen an increase in the tiny housing projects, which has been great. We are working on converting the Skateland center into a space. I know there was a project I haven't heard anything about in a couple months. I haven't had any updates in a couple months that our city councilman was working on, and that had a bit of pushback from the community. So I don't know where that's going. I know Ken Kraft talked about a lot of things. Am I forgetting anything from that meeting that you can think of, David?
No, there's the acquisition of Skateland should be resolved before, what is today? Probably by late next week. I mean, it's coming down the pipe quickly.
Good.
And that will bed about 110 homeless people. And I'm sure that it will fill up quite quickly and it will give services. And it's funny that I don't think Ken realizes that that property is such a large piece of property that they would be able to utilize that whole back area, for to put their services in mobile units, and
Yeah.
not have. I don't think he's really taken. Well, maybe he has. I haven't seen the blueprints recently, but that's a big property. It's a little over an acre, so they've got a lot of room there.
They might be able to use the parking space for Safe Park LA program.
Maybe
So
they're.
good.
And then you also have the two tiny homes that are coming up in our other areas as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the valley.
Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar, Safe Parking LA, that's a project where people experiencing homelessness, and particularly families experiencing homelessness that have their own vehicles, are allowed to park in on a private lot or a government-owned lot, depending on which one they get. You have to sign forms and agree to a lot of stipulations. They don't open it until, I believe, an hour after whatever business or nonprofit or government building there is operating, and they move you off the lot, like I think an hour before they open up. So if it's a church, for example, if they start their first service at 7 a.m, everybody has to wake up and get off the lot, drive off by 6. And if their last service ends at like 11 p.m, you can come back at midnight. So you'd have from midnight to 6 to stay there and sleep. And the city will put forth sanitation and have services on site and security on site to support those who are living in their vehicles during that time. And this is, in some communities, this has been very controversial for various concerns. You do have a lot of, like you have to agree to the curfews, you have to agree to certain laws, you can't have drugs, you can't have alcohol, you can't, there's a lot of restrictions around it to ensure that the surrounding community feels safe. And that has been insufficient for some communities and has been sufficient for others. So I'm not aware of any incidents that have occurred in the places where it's happened. It's just been hard to get up and running because it takes a lot of resources to run. But at a homeless shelter, which the Skateland, at that kind of property is a great place because there's already services on site. I want to take a quick breather to recognize the other new people who have joined us. Hello to John Manning. Hello to Stacy. I'm going to say Hatch, and I hope I didn't screw that up.
Hatchie.
Hey, brother.
Hatchie.
Nice to
Hatsy,
see you,
I'm
John.
so sorry.
It's okay. Hi.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
We are currently talking about item 5, and we've been, it's circuitous. We've been talking about a lot of things. But we're talking about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the LA homelessness crisis, and the kind of compare and contrast what we already had with what we have now is what's been going on at this moment. But feel free to pipe up if you have something you want to say. We're a pretty small group. I'm fairly informal. So if you have something to say, feel free.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm a Castle Bay mom, so I'm just interested in what's going on, and we've got a lot going on at Castle Bay too that I'm interested in trying to see what's happening just in general.
I'm a Castle Bay mom too.
Oh,
Yay.
nice. Hi.
Hello. Mine just started kindergarten. All right.
Okay, 5th grade.
Nice. All right. Yes. So, and that's one of the fun things about doing these kind of committee meetings is this is such a very deep, very complicated well of things that it's hard when you first come to one of these meetings. It's hard when you first get involved because it can be sometimes overwhelming to see what public perception of what's going on can be very different from what's actually going on. And it can be a little disorienting. So please feel free to ask questions. We may end up using acronyms you don't understand. We may talk about services you've never heard of, bridge housing, what the heck is that? That kind of thing happens. Never feel bad about interrupting or asking. We're here to inform and help you. I have completely forgot what I was saying before though.
Madison has a question.
Oh, excellent. Please.
Yes. So just out of curiosity, what currently, at least in the Porter Ranch area, what's the largest, I guess, demographic of the people who are homeless? Like, is it primarily single men and women, or families, or kids in school right now, or students?
So that is a great question that is honestly very hard to answer accurately, but there are answers, but whether or not they are accurate is the question. So there is actually, you know what, I will just screen share and pull this up because this is a good resource to be aware of. So every year except this year because pandemic, at the last few days ish of January, mid to last few days of January, we do what's called the Greater Los Angeles Homelessness Count.
Okay.
So what happened, of course, this year we couldn't do it. This is the official numbers that we get. And let me pull up, even I forget the data, there we go. Sometimes it is hard to navigate this. They have these counts by areas, districts, and SPA, which is service provider area, I think is what the SPA stands for. Ours is, I believe, 2. Now this is LA County, so Los Angeles City is just one of them. If we pull this up, if it decides it wants to let me move it. So we are down.
Keep on going. More to your left.
Yeah, I know, it won't let me move it.
Oh,
Oh, okay, well, lets me turn it. Now I'm lost. Okay, there's Hollywood Hills.
go north.
Ah! Their map is not the best. Oh, there we go. Now it kind of lets me do stuff.
While you're doing that, let me, I'll tell Madison what I know.
Please.
One of the things I do is I interact with a lot of the homeless people to try and get them services.
Backwards.
And I can tell you that we probably have, at least that I know of, about 14 people living in their cars on Tampa, Wilbur, some on Rinaldi, Reseda. There's probably about a half a dozen that are in and out of our town center. And then we've got another, I don't know, a dozen or so that are living off the freeway from anywhere, various spots from Tampa, well, from Porter Ranch Drive to Reseda, that live, in and off the freeway. So we've got a pretty good number up here.
Okay, so
it's
here,
unfortunate.
yeah, so
ahead.
here it at least shows for our service planning area. There's a total of about 9,000 homeless and 6,500 that are unsheltered and 2,000 that are sheltered. So that encompasses a wide range of the valley, but there's at least that. They don't break it down very much as far as like Porter Ranch versus Granada Hills. They do break it down more like CD 12 versus CD 15 or SPA 2 versus SPA 3. So they're kind of looser. Here's some of the totals that we can see for, they say the count is for 2020, but like this is going to be way off because this was in January. So it was before the pandemic started. And yeah, of the 17,000, 12,000 were still unsheltered.
I see.
So the reason I say this is a little skewed is that, like, I mean, you can see, for example, the almost 2,000 family members that it talks about. There's some, Gabriel is here. Interesting. There are a lot of people who become homeless sometimes for short terms. So they just lost their home or there was a fire or something. And they may sleep on couches for a while or drain their savings at a hotel room and then live in their car for a while before they get back on their feet. And those people are less likely to be caught by the count, partly because they'll, especially if they're families, they'll actively hide out of fear that their kids might be taken away, or out of embarrassment because they don't want it to affect their standing in the community, their potential employment, all these things that they fear. And it's not just families. There are a lot of homeless people who, especially those that live in vehicles where they feel like they're less visible, don't want anyone to know they're homeless. So there's a number of tricks. Having been homeless for on and off as a kid myself, I'm familiar with how those tricks are, where you find those 24-hour diners and spend a little too much time at night nursing, a cup of water. There are ways to get around it. There are ways to hide it for a short time. And so these are more likely to catch populations that are chronic or have been there for a while. It's also, if you're homeless for 6 months and those 6 months that you're homeless doesn't cover January, you're not getting counted that year. But someone else who's homeless for only the month of January does get counted. So the numbers can be very off, and they know quite well that these numbers are low. Another reason that happens is they'll have a tendency in certain areas to count each tent as one person, even though sometimes tents can have whole families in them. And some of that is due to safety. The homeless count incorporates volunteers from all over the district. Hundreds and hundreds of people will volunteer, sometimes thousands. And there are frankly places that are not safe. The homeless population is extraordinarily vulnerable to gangs, to cartels. Human trafficking is now considered more profitable than drugs or arms trafficking. So if you need a ready source of lots of people, including children, to use as product, essentially, the homeless population is the easiest to literally just grab. And in fact, one study not too long ago said that depending on the study, 1 out of every 5 or 1 out of every 6 minors, children that live on the streets will be sold at some point into either labor or sex trafficking. So you're right to feel unsafe. The problem is you might be more unsafe, not from the actual homeless, but from those who are preying on them and are in the area.
I was primarily inquiring simply because, especially if a large portion of students, especially or at least teens or kids who are supposed to be going to school are homeless, and especially during these times right now, it's probably very, very difficult for these students to be having access to education right now.
Yes.
That might not be at the forefront of their minds, considering they may have more important things to worry about, such as their well-being. But
correct.
Yeah, thinking about it right now, it's just my heart really goes out to those students who don't have access to maybe internet connection or at least some type of device, I suppose, so that they would be able to go to school at least. So yeah.
You're right. And there are some services that are now harder for them to gain access to. There's a group called School on Wheels in Los Angeles that they even have a little school classroom that's it's mainly for after school, but they have kids that don't get to go to classrooms, and that's their only classroom, and they'll go in and they have access to free schoolwork, and they'll also, or free school tutoring, free help. And they have volunteer programs scattered throughout the county where if you are homeless and you need help, you can try to get a volunteer tutor to come meet you at a library or a cafe or someplace with internet access. But that's, very seriously curtailed right now.
Yes.
A number of people who are homeless and are in the system and have services do have access to devices. I can stop sharing this, simply because they have what used to be referred to as Obama phones. There was a very intentional service to hand out free cell phones to people who are experiencing homelessness so they can stay in touch with, potential job employers and service groups. And nowadays, there's also been a real push to make sure that the children have access to tablets and things. But no, it is nowhere near 100%. In fact, early on, there was one estimate released said they thought about 80% of homeless students that had been in school were no longer able to access it. And we hope that's gotten better. We know for a fact it is much worse at the lower level, preschool and kindergarten. We've lost, I think, about a third of those kids just in general, and we know a lot of those are from families that are hit harder. So we know that COVID is definitely hurting the children and their educational access and their food access, quite frankly. So you are very right to be concerned about that. I do want to take a moment to welcome those who have joined us in the last few minutes. So Gabriel, while he cannot speak because he is a board member, and Sandra. Okay, I got it right on one of those. For those who are not those who are not on the board and are not allowed to speak due to the Brown Act, for everybody else, feel free to pipe up anytime if you have a question or something you'd like to say. We're currently on item 5, talking about the discussion and possible action regarding the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the LA homelessness crisis.
I do want to acknowledge something, Brandy, just
Please.
with LAUSD. I do know that LAUSD really stretched their limits, making sure that almost every child had access to a computer or a tablet because of the pandemic.
Correct.
So, and as well as, you know, if you're deemed homeless, internet usage, you know, if however it may be, you had free services wherever you were able to. You know, if you were in a shelter, if you were at a home, if you were at a bridge home, wherever it might be, all those services were free. But I mean, don't get me wrong, there are people that don't have that accessibility to internet, so they do have to go to a Starbucks or they have to go to an internet cafe, you know, and when everything's shut down, you have nothing, you know, unless you have a cell phone where you're able to use your cell phone on their Wi-Fi and go off of that. But yeah, I think the city and the county really did their very best to try and give people what they needed to make it through what we just went through for the last year. So
correct. You are absolutely correct, and I applaud LAUSD's real attempts. For those who are newer to joining us, I had mentioned before the pandemic started, in 2019, the LAUSD official numbers said that because they have a homelessness department that they deal with, they were aware of slightly over 17,000 students that were homeless, that were deemed homeless within LAUSD. So that was before all of this started. And we do know that early in the pandemic, around April, LAUSD said about 15,000 LA high school students had been completely absent online, and over 30% had failed to check in daily. So we don't know. I would, harbor a guess that a lot of those are probably taken from that 17,000, but there's no data, and I'm not going to take action on stuff I'm guessing. But yes, they have done an incredible job of trying to maintain access to food, maintain access to technology. But yeah, in the end of the day, internet, you can't get access to internet, even with taking advantage of the free internet and reduced internet prices, unless you have a house to have, or a shelter to have access to that stuff. Otherwise, you're driving around hoping you catch your McDonald's Wi-Fi or Starbucks or whatever while you park somewhere. I remember those days. And that's just the ones that are LAUSD. This is not even scratching the surface of students who are outside of high school because they have graduated out and are now at college level. We have a huge amount of homeless youth in what they call the transitional youth space, the 18 to 24. And sadly, a very significant percentage of those come from the foster care system. So these are the students that really don't have any kind of safety net. They don't have any kind of connection, and dumping them can happen in certain places. So
Brandy,
that's...
do we have any numbers, Brandy, for college students? Because I know
yes,
college students, for one reason or another, have lived out of their cars,
So yes, we have, so they even have a separate homelessness count. No, I should actually put Los Angeles. Oh, I did grab it.
We're college students.
Yeah, so it doesn't say whether, so it tells you the transitional youth 18 to 24. It doesn't tell you how many of them are in college, and these are only the ones they're aware of, which is was okay, that would be 2 years ago is the latest number I see right now. Oh no, here we go. Last year, prior to the pandemic, about 5,000 transitional youth. But it doesn't state whether they're in college, and I'm going to guarantee you that doesn't include a lot of students who are in college and not. There's students who live in their cars and don't think of themselves as homeless because it hasn't become an identity that they click with. So if they were asked if they're homeless, they're like, no, but they're living in their car. And that's true of adults as well. You just like, I'm not homeless. I'm just, crashing with my brother. I'm not homeless. I'm just staying in a hotel for a few days while I get back on my feet. And it's after a while, it's like, no, you're homeless. But yeah, and unfortunately we are also not going to get a point in time count update for homeless youth due to the pandemic. So
I'm very concerned that our homeless numbers are going to skyrocket.
Yep.
Count. I mean,
yep.
I can honestly say that what I've seen, it's going to be up almost 20 to 30% of our last number. It's very heart-wrenching.
I would honestly to God be relieved if it was only 20 to 30%, because that's about on par of what we have every year. The average increase of homelessness in LA County is generally between 12 and 17%. So if it were only 20%, that would be just normal, basically, with a small hiccup. But if it's what I honestly, I think it's going to be more like 120% is more than likely, because it's so bad. And some of that's going to be very confusing because we're going to have a situation, I believe, where some people are out faster than others. So there's probably going to be a stretch of time where people aren't homeless, but then they suddenly are when they thought they weren't. And I imagine there's going to be a great deal of confusion once everything starts to try to go back to normal. Here's a thing just talking from June of this last June, again, about the percent. So the city's increase in homelessness from the count that occurred prior to the pandemic in January of last year was 14.5% for the city. Hey, the county only had a 12% increase. Yay. We were somewhere, was it 64,000, 66,000? I forget. The numbers are almost 66,000. It went from 59,000 to 66,000. What's interesting and important to remember is that it's not the same. Like we had 59,000 in the 2019 count and 66,000 in the beginning of 2020 count. That 66,000 isn't all 59,000 of the prior homeless plus a handful more. The city and county housed a lot of people. Thousands of people were put into housing, transitional or permanent housing. So that's a lot of people who are becoming homeless as we replace it. So it's a lot like a leaky bucket where we keep trying to patch it up, but then a new leak springs up somewhere else. And again, if anybody has any comments, because I see occasional nods and stuff, feel free to pipe up. Yeah, so, and that's endlessly frustrating to government services and nonprofit services where they're continuously full. And, Ken Kraft talks about a lot of times that we do all this outreach and we talk to people, but at the end of the day, there's nowhere to put them. And, the Skateland project is huge, but at the end of the day, you said it would cover what, like 100, even if it covered 200 or 300.
110 beds, but you know what? It'll do almost very little. It won't even make a dent.
Even if it were 5,000 people out of 66,000, that's not going to look like that big a difference between 66 and 61,000. That's assuming there were no extra people. It's just not it. All of our efforts, we spend the money, we do the work, and it doesn't feel like it's making as big a difference. And you know, this is, I've been dealing with these issues for years and years at this point, and there's so many varied reasons why people are homeless that makes it hard. There's a significant number of people every year that are just simply homeless for job loss and simple economics. There's a number of people that are homeless because of being dumped out of, you know, foster care or the legal system, or who become homeless because of mental health issues that we're not taking care of. There's a number of people that become homeless who were housed by government services or nonprofit services, and not, they were kind of left to their own devices a little too soon, and they're not either mature enough, or they don't have the mental wherewithal, or they're just not properly prepared to deal with the necessities of keeping a job, budgeting your money, dealing with bus schedules or whatever it needs to be, and they end up homeless again. So it's what was the line I heard once? There's almost as many reasons to be homeless as there are people who are homeless. Oh, Sandra, do you want to say something? You're muted. There you go.
Obviously, another huge reason is drugs.
Yes. And one of the things that's very complicated about the drug issue or alcoholism is that frequently it's a secondary thing. Like a lot of the people who have those addictions, right, a lot of them actually get it after they've been on the street for a while. But those who become homeless because of it, it's oftentimes because they were trying to either self-medicate an undiagnosed mental health issue, or which I guess is also a mental health issue, or they were having a severe depression. A lot of the homeless people I've dealt with who have gotten clean, who did fall into homelessness because of drug or alcohol use, their stories are often things about, my wife died, my child died, I had a bad divorce, I lost this job at this time or that time. And they become overwhelmed and they bury themselves in the wrong comfort, which is, you know, in and of itself another issue about how do we plug the leaks. Is one of the things we need to do is help people when they're in crisis before they become homeless, whether that's helping them financially or helping them with their mental burdens or whatever crisis their life is hit. So yeah, it is surprising how many people, and I get it. It's one of those things where if you ever sleep on the floor for a night, it may not feel the best, but you think, hey, I can handle this. But after the 60th night of sleeping on the floor, you kind of get, it's just like the pandemic shutdown. Like, oh, I can stay in my house all day. That's fine. But here we are a year later, and it's driving a lot of people crazy. And it's that same thing, is after a while, the situation of having to deal with what it's like living a homeless life drives them into depression and increased risk for mental health and things where they self-medicate. I had a 19-year-old I dealt with one time where she wanted to, this is one of those cases where she wanted to be with her family, but couldn't because she's a legal adult. And she was told by a service provider that they didn't have any way to help her because she wasn't either a victim of domestic violence or a drug addict. And after the service person went to go answer a phone call, she turned to me and she said, should I tell them I don't think I'm an addict, but I was, I apologize for the trigger warning here. She said, I was raped twice in the last 2 months. And so I started taking meth so I can stay awake at night to fight them off. And so I take it now, but does that count as an addiction? Should I tell them? I'm just like, yes, tell them, tell them you have a meth addiction so they can get you help. And, you know, that was why she started taking drugs, because it helped keep her awake. So there's horrible circumstances like that can pop up. And that's not even counting the fact that like there was this big thing a while back where they put in a bunch of porta potties down near Skid Row, and the gangs took over them and the cartels took over them and told people, you can't use these bathrooms unless either A, you are an employee, B, you are a customer, or C, basically you're a mule, I guess, is an employee, but you had to join the group, work for the group, or buy drugs. So they got people hooked because they bought this stuff to use the bathroom, and it was sitting there, and it was a temptation. So, yep, that's an issue too.
I think one of the most heart-wrenching things that I've dealt with, and I've come across it numerous times. I've met people that are professionals that, crazy enough, got in a car accident, got into an accident,
Oh, yeah.
and were prescribed medicine and became hooked on the drugs, and that became their demise. And they just,
Oh yeah, the opioid
they lost
crisis.
the opioids, they lost their job, they lost their family, they became homeless. And I hear it over and over and over again. And you know, and one of the reasons, and Brandy was absolutely correct, one of the reasons why people do drugs is because at nighttime, they need to stay awake to survive. At daytime, if you notice how many homeless people, they're sleeping because at nighttime, they have to stay awake. They have to, just to survive.
There was,
It's a very scary life.
yeah, there was, I feel, what is it, Baltimore? I can't remember exactly. There was an entire city, like 2 years ago, that had an opioid crisis because it was mostly elderly. We have a lot of elderly homeless, like a lot. People who took, who were financially struggling and took early Social Security. So they've got the lowest level of Social Security that they'll ever get. They kept working, but that doesn't change anything. And then they became too old to continue working. They might oftentimes have an opioid issue. And you'll see homeless people with walkers and broken wheelchairs and canes. I do want to take a pause and welcome the new members that joined us. Our fellow council committee member, Midan, welcome. And Chris, I'm going to mispronounce your last name, so I'm just not going to. I'm sorry. So feel free to pipe up if you have any questions or you want to make any comments. This is very open. We are currently on item 5, discussing the COVID-19 impact on the homelessness crisis. Yeah, does anybody have any other comments or questions? Sandra, go ahead. Just unmute.
So as we walk throughout our community and drive throughout our community, and we see examples of homelessness, what, number one, is the protocol? And what are the rights of the homeless, and what are the rights of the community members?
So the important thing to remember is that they should be treated and approached in much the same way as any other person you meet on the street. So, I mean, it sounds obvious, but you would be surprised. There have been people in LA who like draw guns. But they have most of the same rights you do. Some that have been more explicitly spelled out in recent years include things like they can, in fact, pitch a tent as long as it's not completely blocking the sidewalk, or they're mostly things that don't apply to you, but apply to the government. Like the government has to give them a certain amount of notice before a sweep. They can't take their property and just throw away their property without permission or certain steps being taken. In general, you should allow an expert to handle it because assuming you are not an expert, you don't always know what the person's situation is. But feel free, if this is a person that seems like a normal person, treat them as a normal person. Speak to them, ask them if they need anything, ask them if they want anything. If they say no, honestly, with so many people in need, it's easier to just move on and let the professionals, like if you think that there's a danger or something illegal or something problematic about it, you can always report. You can call 911 if it seems to be an emergency. And our first agenda item actually talked about the fact that we have a really poor set of services as far as who to call. 311 is supposed to help for resources on the city, 211 on the county, 911 for emergency. There's mental health triage, but I see there's a hand raised, and I will call on you in just a moment. Sorry, Sandra, you started to say something, looked like?
Well, no, so specifically in Porter Ranch, all right?
Yes.
I don't want to take it upon myself to query the person and find out what's
Okay.
going on inside the tent. I had taken my walk yesterday. When I got up to ET Park, there was someone who had set up a tent, and I could, smell different chemicals wafting through the tent. So, I mean, just for example, the gentleman at the corner that was in the park that's now on the street. Are there specific rules that say, yes, it's okay if you set up tents on the street, or no, it's not okay? What are the rules?
Yeah, I mean, so the rules
Excuse me, and just as much as the RVs that are parked. I remember years
Right.
ago, I had an RV in front of my home where I've lived for 40 years here in Porter Ranch. And periodically, the traffic enforcement would come and mark my tires, and I would move it. So could we address that?
Sure. During the, actually, hold on, just so that I'm being all official here. I'll move this to item 6, and we can go back to 5 if anybody needs to, but this is something we've talked about before, so it counts as old business. So during the pandemic, parking vehicles has mostly been okay pretty much anywhere. There are exceptions, but they're trying to reduce enforcement on parking in order to allow for pandemic management, so that people who need to have a space to stay safe during the pandemic can park there. That doesn't mean that they can, be unsanitary to unsafe levels in however they're parked. And if you smell chemicals, especially in areas where if it's a chemical that might cause a fire, feel free to either call 311 or 911. If you think it's immediately like there's something really bad going on here, call 911. If you think this seems suspicious, call 311 and report it. But one of the big problems that we talked about earlier in this meeting is the fact that, if there's somebody, but the analogy I like to use is if somebody broke into your home, you call 911, they take responsibility to send out the right people and handle the situation appropriately. But if it were handled like what it was with homeless services right now, the person on the line at 911 would be like, okay, well, if you think this person is on drugs, call this number. If you think this person is here to steal your money, call this other number. If you think this person is here because they're confused, call this other. But they don't do that. That's ridiculous. But that's how we handle homelessness right now. And that's, I believe, inadequate, and something that I want us to address from the larger council, which is something we voted to bring up. Does that at least answer most of your question?
Certainly, you're doing a fine job on that.
I'm trying.
No, but for example, I had called Councilman Lee's office, and I had even asked for, a trash can to be available for the people. But I can see this obviously building. Is there any space that we have, a parking lot or something where we can direct? I'm not trying to be the, oh my goodness, in Porter Ranch, I don't want to look at a homeless person. No, I want to be part of the solution.
You want to help.
Do we have something for them? Do we have a vacant parking or some parking somewhere where people can go? It breaks my heart when I see this gentleman who's moved from the park to the street. I mean, I think we have some liability. If somebody jumps that curve, which is very easy to do, that man is in danger.
Short answer, no. We don't have anywhere to send them. Long answer, it's very dependent on the person. So if he's a veteran, then we have a place that he can go. If he's a victim of domestic violence, there might be a place for him to go. We have so many different segmented places that there are some places that he might be able to get help faster, and there are places where he might not be able to get any help. We don't have
So it's very hard to assess.
Yes.
It's very hard to assess these people, obviously. And I don't think it's my place to go and knock on the tent and try to ask them 20 questions to find out really what the problem is.
And the best thing you can do right now is report it through 311 or 911 and hope that somebody deals with it. But, we've been dealing with a woman for a week that county's not doing anything no matter what we do. And that's just kind of an ongoing issue. City and county won't do things sometimes.
But what I'm hearing, and I may be wrong, is that because of COVID, whatever happens in our community, and I'm not taking a defeatist stance, and I know that you're not either, but what are you saying is because of COVID, basically whatever happens, it's going to happen.
A bit, and I promise for the other people with hands up, I will get to you soon. To be honest, COVID has made it worse, but it wasn't much better before. It just wasn't. We haven't been able to get a lot of people help for a very, very long time. I mean, I know homeless people who are part of government organizations like homelessness related committees, and who have cell phone numbers for council members and the mayor. They know them personally, and they're still on the streets because there's nowhere for them to go yet. And they're in the list of services, but unless they have certain criteria, they just never match. They just don't get help. And they've been doing advocacy for years as a homeless person who can't really help themselves and can't get services. So yeah, our system hasn't been great, and it's just kind of getting a lot worse. It's exploding is the
Yes.
problem.
And my final thing is,
Go
when
ahead.
I had called, I'm looking at my call log book. When I had
Yeah.
called Councilman Lee's office, and I know, believe me, how inundated they are, and
Yeah.
was talking about how we can move the RV people someplace where it was safer.
Right.
They said they would like to put up 72-hour parking signs, but it's going to take some time to make those signs. That was a year ago.
Right. And part of the problem is a couple of things have happened. One is that we have to remember that we can tell them they can't park there for more than a certain amount of time, but if they don't have anywhere to go, they'll come back because they don't have anywhere to go. And the other problem is there was this judgment that came down recently that has required LA to take more action, and also to take action in certain ways. So they have to put people who are homeless into bedding, and it can't be within a certain amount of feet of freeways, and there's a lot of these pushes and restrictions. So they're kind of tripping over themselves to try to adhere to this court order, and that's taking up a lot of their current bandwidth. Which, you know what, honestly, one of the big problems in homelessness is that depending on who's in charge, and that can mean as an individual or as an administration, depending on, frankly, what the media talks about recently, changes the priorities of what category of homelessness gets services and funding. So when domestic violence was a really big issue, there was a ton of funding all of a sudden for domestic violence victims, and suddenly no funding for, say, veterans or families. And then veterans had become a bigger issue recently. So there was a lot of push to redo the veteran centers, and there was more funding for that. And then families got the shaft, and single women got the shaft. And there was the She Deserves movement. I forget what it's called. I was a part of it, and I can't remember what it was called. So suddenly there was a push for more funding for single women shelters, but then families and married couples don't get help. And so there's kind of this limited pile of money, and it gets shifted around depending on what the media and the public says they need. And different groups want different things, because some people are like, I want to help these people, let's do whatever it takes to help them. And others are like, I want these people just gone, just get rid of them. And some people are like, let's build stuff to get them off your street. And some people are like, I don't want that in my neighborhood. So I'm not saying anybody on either side is wrong. It's just competing goals and conflicts. And the more there's a conflict, the longer it takes for anything to happen, and the more likely that you end up with a stalemate and nothing happens and the situation doesn't get better. And that's
Yeah, go ahead. I don't want to overtake my more time than I deserve, but it just seems like it basically is whatever is going to happen has happened, and we have no really say or infrastructure to provide for them, because we're never going to find out really what their specific needs are.
Right. We do have a say as a community. That is something we can do. John Manning, I want to give you a turn.
Yeah, I have about three things. I was in a meeting,
Go for it.
Wendy, with Ken, and he said he was going to have 105 beds at Skateland.
Okay, 105. That sounds about right.
April. And then last night I was in a West North Hollywood council meeting where North Hollywood Station was talking about the defunding of the police. And I found out that the Hope team has been broke down because of no funding.
Mm.
But they're saying those monies are supposed to go to other departments that are supposed to help. Is that what we're referring to with the 311?
No, 311 is if you dial 311 on your phone, that's city services.
Right.
So it's just now whether or not we decide that some funding should go to 311 is a separate matter. I don't believe any of the police reform movement is pushing for that to be part of that.
Well, they made that voice last night that
Okay.
they think that some of that funding should go to help the homeless, but
Okay.
I'm just wondering how long that's going to take before it goes into effect. The need was like last year.
Yeah, I mean, so that that gets into an issue for a different committee, which is incredibly important and valid, and I'm actually part of that.
I should bring it up because the more people are aware of it, if they're pushing the issue of they're taking those funds and they're going to use it someplace else, I'd rather see it go to, something that's going to benefit everybody and not somebody's pocket.
I definitely agree with you on that. What I will say is that I think what in my very personal opinion is that I would like to see some of the funds go to help create an adjacentness to our current LAPD setup so that there are people who were trained from the start to help with this, whether it's because they have a background in mental health or in homelessness services or whatever, that can go deal with this. Because I don't think it is the most effective thing to take officers who are trained to deal with, chasing down criminals and then try to turn them into service providers or advocates. I'd rather see them be able to work with. I would like to see a police officer go with a group of advocates and medical professionals who can go in and handle this, and the officer's just there casually for protection, plainclothes.
Yeah, that would be a good thing. But from what I heard last night, they're not going to be able to do that because they're taking people out of the office and out of the desk to put them on patrol.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of it will depend on where the majority of the community lands on what happens. And until that political hot button gets managed, nothing else.
I think that the community's got to start raising their hands now before they divvy up those funds to go someplace else.
I would agree. I want to give Miran a chance to speak and then come back to Sandra, unless you have something else, John.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Miran, your turn.
Yeah, thank you. Brandy, couple of things I need to bring this up to your attention. We really need priority also for veterans,
yes,
as they seem to be neglected in the system and nowhere to go. We need also more connect days to help homeless. 3, we need to get our officials to spend more efforts and time to come up with solutions. And I have to say that the champion of CD3, Councilman Bloomfield, allows homeless with cars to park at night in designated safe parks. That's very important. CD3, they are very well, they have a great solutions that they help everyone, whether the veterans or non-veterans. I hope that we can all adopt something similar where we can help in more comprehensive plan when homeless, whether they are in a car or not in a car, they need to know what they are doing. I mean, the other day by Porter Ranch, there was a veteran in the car. He didn't know what to do. He was skeptical even to call police. He said, I might get arrested. But where is a designated safe place that he can park? There is a law and there is a resolution that was passed last year. There is a budget there, but we need to know what are the channels we need to use in order to bring the veterans back. They should not be neglected. Veterans, they served our country and we owe back to them. We should do more outreach during COVID-19. We should have everyone here, they give very good ideas. And I listened to the questions. Should we create a template of information, step by step, what they need to do?
Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
No, that's what, it's something that we need to put that a priority in and work together how we can find a solution. Look how Bob Lumpert is working. He's doing a great job. He's the champion. He has a very clean and safe district.
I agree. The veterans, I mean, I'm a military brat, so of course I care about the veterans. My family is all veterans. For those who haven't seen this, inside the West LA Veterans Campus, they have what they're calling Veterans Tent Row, Veterans Row. It's a tent protest, and so they all have these flags up. So it's an issue. It's a serious issue, and okay, I will try to say this as diplomatically as I can. 2 administrations ago, by the end of it, this had been made a priority that was no longer a priority once that administration ended. Now that we'll say, successor of that administration is in power again, I suspect this might become a priority again. My apologies of trying to be diplomatic on that, but yeah. So I suspect this will become a thing again very quickly. And the fact that there has been like NPR and LA local news has been talking more about the West LA campus, which was, I mean, I went to a meeting in, I think 2015 before the outgoing administration, and literally the head of the Veterans Affairs Department, like the cabinet member, came and talked to a small room of us that were homelessness advocates. And he spoke about what they were trying to do for the West LA Veterans Campus. So they've been pushing on this at a very high level to make sure that something happens. That is another group of people that they just like everybody else, they get shafted, and there's too many. It's untenable to me that somebody who served our country ends up treated this way.
Brandy, I just want to add one more thing, please.
Go ahead.
311 is funded by the different departments like Street LA and the street lighting and sanitation. This is from assessment general funds to address repairs, and has nothing to do with police defunding at all. Because I attended to the meeting for the city of Los Angeles, and I was specifically wanted to learn about 311, and that's exactly what they said.
I think the point being made is that there is a newly released amount of funds that haven't been allocated any particular place. So where that 150 million lands is up for debate and could literally go pretty much anywhere, I think.
Hey, Brandy.
Go ahead.
Because Miran brought that up, regarding that the money does come for 311 does come from Streets LA and street lighting, but would he like to expand on what the general fund assessment is to people that don't know?
Would you like to, Miran?
Okay.
Go for it.
The 150 million that they are talking about, it's irrelevant. It's something to do different with the police itself. That's number one. But the money of 311, it is in a specific operation within city of Los Angeles that they protect and the support going through street LA and the street lighting and sanitation. That's one way, one channel where the funding is coming from. And they don't touch it, because if they touch, they can paralyze that 311 system, and it could stop the operation from providing the service. When I call 311 or I put that on my cell phone, I can track that down. I see where is that transaction is up to. If I have a problem, for example, in Porter Ranch, and I see that they need to come pick it up, as soon as I took a picture and I add that on my 311, they will respond back, and I see that they came and they cleaned it up. But there is a specific fund, it's only for 311. It's protected under the legislation of Section B and C. 311 is a whole service for the entire community and stakeholders. I know there are funds. Where the funds are going? What LAPD? It's a question. I see LAPD in Canoga. I see what they do. And
Thank
we
you.
need to have a voice how we can help the homelessness.
Agreed.
It is sad to see a homelessness and doesn't receive the support and help, whether it's psychologically, mentally, or even a shelter as well. Everything that you just mentioned, Brandy, my heart is shattering. I had tears.
Oh,
Uh, and
and you're on this committee, so you've been around, you know about this. I do want to point out for those who joined us late, we did take a vote earlier in the meeting to bring before the general PRNC board an item on the agenda that will be discussing the city and county services as they exist versus how we might like to see them, with the intention of getting input from the community about their experience with services in terms of reporting homelessness or helping homeless. And with the whole idea being, if we get feedback on what our community would like to see, we can write a letter and try to get other neighborhood councils to have a voice in what we think our services should respond as. I would like to Sandra, you had your hand up.
Yes. Oh, first of all, I want to just say, am I saying your name right, Moran? Am I saying your name right? I absolutely, your passion, I want to stand up and applaud, or just go over and give you a hug. It's absolutely wonderful what the words that you speak. I want to thank Becky for texting me and letting me know that there was a meeting. I just want to let you know that as a member in the community and as a teacher in the community, I really want to be involved and make things in any way that I can better. So I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I want to jump in and commit to that. And it is time to make this homelessness issue a priority. And the other what I would like to see is, I like the coziness of our little group, but I know that I have so many people that I run into that have so much to say. How can we create an environment, or how can we reach out to these people so we can get more people to come to our, even now, a Zoom meeting and get the word out and really get more community involvement.
I think getting this item that we agreed to put on the agenda for the next meeting is a great opportunity to get lots of people to come and be involved as a first step, because we can discuss these issues at this larger community forum, bring to light what's going on. And I think that would be a great place if we can get a lot of people on board. They're usually larger meetings anyway. And then someone like you, I would love to see you could join our committee here and just be an official member of the committee as a community member. And we'd love that. I want more people to get involved. I want more people to understand. I mean, the Harvard estimate recently said in November said that COVID has cost the US $16 trillion. And this is going to hurt everybody. And this is definitely at the worst going to hurt the homeless community that was already hurting. They were already at the end of the spectrum. They were already getting hurt, and this is just making it worse. So I feel like we have a short window to make our voices heard and help our officials to take the right actions before we try to return to normal. Because if there aren't more things in place, I can't even imagine what the fallout's going to be. It's just going to get so much worse. I know it is.
Randy,
Go ahead.
You know, if you remember, there was an initiative one time for homeless neighborhood councils in downtown. Do you remember?
Oh,
And
yes.
that was killed. Now, uh, I remember that Car City didn't feel it's mature enough to have one NC for homeless at that time.
Yeah.
But they allowed homeless to be candidates and can vote.
Yes.
Now, shouldn't we, as Sandra and everyone else today that raised their voices, it's very touching. I appreciate everyone. I appreciate my board members. We should actually do a round table town hall only specifically about homeless. And trust me, just what Sandra's voice and anyone's voice, it will bring attention and we can have a clear initiative how in our district, how in our neighborhood, we can serve and help our homelessness. And we
You know,
can all put together, our community members are here. You can bring it up next time to the PRNC board member, and we need to do it. We should not be afraid of. Our officials, they need to listen to us. We represent them and they need to do their job.
I had a similar thought coming into this meeting that I was going to propose at the end of this meeting that we talk about doing a town hall. Something I think that would be useful. Normally town halls, oh, John's raising his hand. Oh, you're leaving. Okay, he left. Normally town halls are a lot of speeches by electeds, yada, 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 and some nonprofits, maybe one speaker. I think it would be better if we actually got people who work with the homeless, maybe some former Hope members and
Certainly.
homeless people, because we're over Zoom. It's a lot safer than I know some people who are experiencing homelessness are afraid to go to these town halls because they're afraid they're going to be attacked. They're afraid of what other people will do to them. But over Zoom, they don't have to have a camera. They can use whatever pseudonym they want and they can participate and talk about their experience being homeless. And I think that would be useful so people can hear from different sides instead of, frankly, a lot of speeches from electives. Like, I mean, not that they're not valid, not that they're not important. I'd like to invite them, but I think it's important to hear from the people that are involved in this more than just the people who are supposed to be helping.
Certainly. Brandy, since we opened this topic, maybe, and you are right, this should be about homeless. This should be those who are in shelter. They need to come and talk. We should reach out to them and we need to open that town hall. Maybe you can come up right now with a verdict, a quick verdict, and also with a quick motion, and then your committee is here, we can vote on it, and you can put that next time on the board. That town hall should be talking about not you, not me, not anyone else. It should be
Right.
about homelessness that they are already on the site and they need to come and talk. Let them share their pain. Let them share their experiences. That will be a way to analyze, and that will be a way we can put the scale of how we can help them.
And have the service providers there to talk about their
100%.
experiences. Yeah. Does anybody else have any thoughts on this that they would like to say?
Well, I think, Brandy, we've already established that we're going to bring this discussion and possible action to the board at this meeting. And at that time, there's no reason why we can't formally request to go
To do a
ahead
town
and
hall.
do a town hall.
Okay. I will say that I'm very happy to do it. I imagine we'd have to do it 1 or 2 months. It would take a couple months to set up. There is an election, so there's always the possibility I won't officially be on the board anymore, but I'll at least stay part of this committee no matter what happens. So I can still work on the town hall even if I'm no longer on the board. But just making sure everybody's aware there's always that potential hiccup of process.
Brandy, really quick, just because I know we have, we already lost John.
Yeah.
But I want to let the community know, I'm very involved with the homeless. And if you're not comfortable interacting with somebody that you feel needs services, you can reach out to me directly and I'll give you my phone number. I mean, everybody has my phone number, but it's 818-943-7676. And I interact with the homeless and I try to get them services as fast as possible. I don't have an issue speaking to them or assisting them.
You beat me to it. I was going to say the same thing about me. So I will give everybody my number as well. It
Thank you,
is
Brandy.
360-441-1988. And you can text me anytime and I will reach into my my list of contacts and see who I can get to respond to what. And David, I want to talk to you later about what we can do for our friend that isn't getting help.
Sure.
But let's see. So we talked about old business. We actually talked about goals and functions within that. So unless there's anybody that has anything they want to say on item 7, I'll kind of count that as being done as well. Oh, we have 2 hands. Okay. Miran, go ahead.
No,
think you
no,
should
I
take
already
one-
talked. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, I was gonna
sorry,
say, take
Chris.
Chris.
Yes, Chris.
No problem. I just want to thank you guys for letting me in. I just ran across this by accident today on Nextdoor, but I'm Vice President of the Association for the Port Ranch Estates, and I feel good to be getting on here and listening to you guys. And is there a way that I could find out when the meetings are and stuff, so can I join?
Yeah, we post them on the PRNC website.
Okay, I signed up for that before I came in here. That's good. Okay.
Excellent. So yeah, when we have meetings, then they'll be posted there. Actually, I didn't put that as an item on here, which is figuring out when we should have our next meeting. I like having them once a month, but if people wanted to do it more frequently, I will do what the community wants, especially if we're going to do something.
Right.
I think waiting until after the next board meeting is a good idea, so we see how that goes. Because after that, we might need to do a few meetings in a row to set up for any potential town hall or other actions, such as writing a letter. Let's see. So the next board meeting is the 10th of March. So we could do the homeless committee. We could do it the next day on the 11th on Thursday, or we could do it on like Tuesday the 16th if people like this date and time.
Unfortunately, the 11th would not work for me because
Okay.
we have VANC, Valley
yeah.
Alliance of Neighborhood Councils, and that's always the second Thursday.
Okay. Does keeping it on Tuesday work for you?
Sure. And he does. Only that it's just that second week of every month for anybody in the neighborhood council family. We are just barraged with meetings. If it's not LAPD, it's bank,
Yeah, that's true.
It's not bank, it's bonk, it's not bonk, it's your council meetings. So I would say first or third week of the month is always good.
Yeah, I get stuff through the second week and the first week and a few things in the third week, but I have time on the 16th. So I say we aim for March 16th for the next meeting, which will be a review of what happened at the previous meeting and any work that we start for that. So unless there's any objection to that, I'll say that's the next meeting date. Let's see. Public comment on items not on the agenda and within. Oh, actually, before I do. So, Chris, if you don't get our newsletter with the meetings or anything, feel free to let us know, and we're there for you. Anyway, item 8. Any public comment on items not on the agenda but within the purview of this committee? This is the catch-all for anything that somebody wants to bring up that wasn't brought up. And I see no hands. Okay. With that, if there's no other items or questions that anybody has, then I think this was a really wonderful meeting. I'm very happy to see that we had members of the community that we haven't had before. If you have any questions or suggestions or things that you would like to talk to me about outside of the meeting, My PRNC email is brandygrace@prnc.org. All emails that go to PRNC emails are a matter of public record. So if you want to talk to me off of public record, you can email me at, I will put this on here. Type it so it's easier than saying it. And share screen. There we go. This is my personal work email. Like this is my personal email. So feel free to email me there if you want to talk offline about stuff. And if you want to be public record, then you have the public emails. And yeah, you have my phone number. You can also text me. And if you run into somebody who is homeless and you want help, please feel free to reach out. I'm here to help.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you everyone so much. I'm so happy. And to Sandra, your teacher, thank you, bless you.
That's what I've got to do right now. I've got to spend another couple hours doing report cards.
Oh,
And,
where do you
let's,
teach?
And let's
I'm at
give
Castle
another
Bay.
thank you,
Yes.
thank you to Madison Chaw, a student from Granada Hills High School, for
Yes.
joining our meeting. So thank you again, Madison.
It was a pleasure.
Thank
to
you,
be-
Madison.
And Sandra, I teach. My son just started Castle Bay as a kindergartner, so hopefully.
Oh, if you ever need anything, I did it for 9 years.
Oh wow,
No, really.
wow, that's
I
amazing.
can show you how to get him to be a reader at 2nd grade level in 3 weeks.
Okay, want to be my best friend now?
I'm telling you, I'm going to be 72 next month. And people say to
No.
me, how come I haven't retired? It's because I'm insanely passionate
I'll stop
about
recording.
teaching.
This is official adjournment. I will